Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we really get into a piece of work, pull out the key stuff, and help you figure out what matters and how it affects you. So today we're diving into Kai-Fu Lee's AI Superpowers: China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order. It's quite a read. Offers a really interesting take on the whole global AI scene.
Yeah, it really does. Lee's got this incredible background, doesn't he? He's been deep inside tech in both the US and China, Apple, Microsoft, Google.
Right, and then he started his own VC firm in China, so he's seen it all, basically, from both sides.
Exactly. He's got that unique vantage point on this whole tech revolution.
So our mission today, it's not just about, summarizing the book. We want to pull out the really actionable insights, especially looking at the US versus China in AI. We're trying to answer that big question. How do we even make sense of all this AI stuff changing so fast? And what does it actually mean for you, for your life, your job? It feels like it's moving at light speed sometimes.
It really does. And that's something Lee really emphasizes, just the sheer speed and the scale of AI development happening now. Huge ambition, massive resources being poured in.
Yeah.
And he paints this picture of two very different engines driving it all. The US and China, different approaches, different philosophies almost.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's look at what Lee calls the AI fever in China. He points to a really specific moment, AlphaGo beating Lee Sedol, the Go champion, back in 2016.
Right. That was huge.
Maybe it sounds niche to some of us, but Lee says over 280 million people in China watched that match.
Wow.
That's like the whole population of Western Europe almost.
Incredible. And that event, Lee argues, it was like a spark. It really lit a fire under the whole nation, creating this sense of urgency, opportunity around AI.
He even compares it to the U.S. reaction to Sputnik back in the day.
Yeah.
That same kind of, we need to catch up, we need to lead feeling.
Yeah, a real national mobilization moment.
And then the money just flooded in, right? The book talks about this explosion of investment in Chinese AI startups, VCs, the big tech companies, and a lot of government support, too.
A huge amount. By 2017, Lee points out China was actually getting 48% of all global AI venture funding.
48%,
Yep.
more than the U.S.
Yep. Surpassed the U.S. for the first time. That wasn't just like a blip on the radar. It was a major shift.
A real strategic pivot.
Absolutely. And you have to remember, the Chinese government already had these really ambitious plans in place. They'd stated this goal: become the world's #1 AI innovation hub by 2030.
Wow.
With specific targets for 2020, 2025, very clear top-down direction. That's kind of a hallmark of their approach, isn't it?
Definitely. So let's contrast that. Let's look at the two ecosystems, Silicon Valley versus China. Lee kind of takes us back to the early days, the pioneers like Minsky, McCarthy.
Oh, and dreamers.
Yeah, dreaming of building machines that could think like humans.
Yeah.
Seemed pretty far off back then.
It really did. And Lee even shares his own, early dream. He wrote this grandiose description of AI for his university application in the 80s.
Oh.
Something like men's final step to understand themselves. That very philosophical, almost sci-fi view of AI.
Right. But then things shifted. Around 2012, deep learning suddenly became a huge deal.
Yes, the breakthrough.
Lee explains how these complex neural networks got really good, really fast, at learning from massive amounts of data. Things like recognizing speech, identifying images.
Yeah, suddenly it wasn't just theory anymore. It was working in the real world.
Yeah.
Enabling stuff like self-driving cars, better translation.
It moved from being this kind of niche research area to the absolute center of AI development.
Exactly. That success, especially Geoffrey Hinton's team winning that big computer vision contest, it basically thawed the AI winter, as they called it, unleashed all these practical uses.
Okay, so tech takes this leap, and then Lee starts comparing the cultures, right? The internet ecosystems in Silicon Valley and China.
Very different foundations.
He paints the typical Silicon Valley founder as, often from a professional background, maybe Ivy League educated, big ideas about changing the world, disruption.
Right, that mission-driven ethos. Whereas in China, he describes entrepreneurs coming from maybe a different background, operating in a culture where, copying wasn't necessarily frowned upon, at least initially.
A scarcity mentality, he calls it.
Yeah, and just this fierce, almost desperate drive to succeed, willing to jump into any industry that looked promising, very pragmatic.
And Silicon Valley at first kind of laughed at the Chinese copycats, didn't they?
They did, dismiss them. But Lee makes this brilliant point. The real product of that era wasn't the copied software. It
Oh.
was the entrepreneurs themselves. They were learning incredibly fast, getting really good at execution, competition. It was like a brutal training ground.
Ah, okay, so the copying phase was actually building crucial skills.
Precisely. Skills like agility, speed, how to fight in a super competitive market, those became invaluable later on.
Which leads us nicely into this idea Lee calls the gladiator ethos.
hmm Love that term.
He uses this cool analogy about uh, clocks, European clocks sent to the Chinese emperor centuries ago,
Yeah, the emperor's new clocks.
and how the Chinese artisans quickly figured them out, mastered the technology, and then started making even better ones themselves. He mentions Guangzhou becoming a clockmaking center.
It illustrates this historical pattern, right? Taking foreign tech, mastering it, then innovating on top of it. We can do this, and maybe even better.
That context helps understand the tech evolution. The early copy kitten phase, as he calls it, mirroring Silicon Valley apps. That was just step one.
Just the starting point. Because
Yeah.
what came next was this incredibly fierce competition within China, a real gladiatorial arena.
He uses the War of a Thousand Groupons as the prime example. Just imagine thousands of companies all trying to be the Chinese Groupon, fighting like mad.
It sounds absolutely cutthroat. Lee describes insane tactics, burning cash on subsidies, aggressive marketing, maybe even shady stuff,
Yeah.
just relentless.
Survival of the fittest, basically.
Totally Darwinian. It wasn't just about having a slightly better app. It was about outmarketing, outspending, outworking everyone else. The work ethic was legendary, 996, you know.
Yeah, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. meter, 6 days a week. Crazy.
And Lee contrasts this with Silicon Valley, where there's often this stronger emphasis on pure originality, maybe sometimes an aversion to direct head-to-head slugfests.
Which can maybe lead to a bit of complacency sometimes.
Perhaps. Lee suggests that in China, you had to be a gladiator to survive. Constant battle. You had to out-execute. He talks
Yeah.
about Wang Sheng, right? Started copying, failed a few times.
But eventually built Meituan.
Exactly. Became this massive success story, learned the hard way, adapted, and just outcompeted everyone in that brutal Chinese market. He's like the ultimate example of that gladiator ethos.
Okay, so that environment breeds tough competitors. And out of that comes something really unique. The super app. Specifically WeChat.
Ah, WeChat, the digital Swiss Army knife, Lee calls it.
It's such a good description. It's not just messaging. It's payments, social media, booking taxis, paying bills, ordering food, everything.
Right. All rolled into one app. That's the huge difference compared to the US, isn't it? Here, we've got like an app for everything. It's fragmented.
Totally. WeChat just smooths everything out.
Yeah.
Unbelievably convenient for users. Imagine trying to juggle 10 different apps for your daily stuff.
And the growth was just insane. Lee says it hit 100 million users in barely over a year.
Wow.
Then they pioneered that app within an app thing with official accounts, changed how businesses connect with people. It literally became the remote control for life in China. Online, offline, didn't matter.
Payments in stores, hailing rides.
It basically became the OS for mobile life for like almost everyone, and they weren't afraid to shake things up. Lee talks about that brilliant move against Alipay.
Pearl Harbor attack.
Yeah, using the red envelope feature during Chinese New Year. Suddenly, millions were linking bank accounts to WeChat for sending digital gift money. Boom! They were a massive payments player overnight.
Genius social engineering, really.
Absolutely, just leverage that social connection.
Yeah. Okay, so we have the intense competition, the rise of super apps. But another huge piece of the puzzle, Lee says, is the Chinese government's role. They weren't just watching. They were actively pushing things forward. An accelerator.
That's a really key difference from the more hands-off approach you often see in the US, right? The Chinese government was actively promoting AI, promoting entrepreneurship.
Like that mass entrepreneurship and mass innovation campaign from 2014.
Exactly. That wasn't just talk. They set up tons of incubators, special tech zones, and these government guiding funds.
Right. Tell us about those guiding funds. How did they work?
Well, basically, they were government funds designed to attract private VC money into areas like AI. The government would put in some money, often taking a junior position, which helps de-risk the investment for private VCs.
Ah, so it encourages private investors to jump in.
Yeah, it signals government backing and reduces the downside risk. It's like government-sponsored VC almost. And Lee mentions how local officials were actually incentivized to make these things work. It helped their careers.
So a very deliberate, coordinated push from the top down.
Highly coordinated, very different from the more organic, bottom-up growth you saw in Silicon Valley, Lee uses the example of that street that created in Beijing, Tuangyidaji, Avenue of the Entrepreneurs.
Like they just decided we're building a tech hub here and provided all the infrastructure.
Pretty much. A very direct, maybe even brute force way to try and build an innovation ecosystem quickly. Focus on the physical space, the funding. Everything needed to scale up fast.
And all that really set the stage for the mobile payment explosion, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Alipay, WeChat Pay, the adoption was just unbelievably fast and widespread. Lee cites that by the end of 2017, something like 65% of smartphone users in China were using mobile payments.
65%. That's huge compared to anywhere else, really.
It completely changed daily life. Even like tiny street vendors, beggars apparently, were using QR codes to accept payments. It just went everywhere.
Because it was so easy and cheap.
Exactly. Super convenient, low barrier to entry. And the big players, Alibaba and Tencent, they weren't shy about spending money to get people hooked. Massive subsidies, especially for things like ride-hailing.
Just burning cash to grab market share.
Yeah, a classic strategy in that market. Prioritize growth over immediate profit. And this whole frictionless payment system enabled other innovations too, like that whole bike sharing, Boom Mobike, a faux.
Right. You needed easy mobile payments for that to work at scale.
Couldn't happen without it. A real-world innovation built on that digital foundation.
Amazing speed. Okay, shifting gears a bit, Lee also talks about the global hunt for talent, the AI talent war.
It's fierce. He identifies the 7 giants, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft in the US.
And Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent in China.
BAT. Right. They're all battling for the top AI researchers, the top engineers, paying huge salaries, acquiring startups just for the people.
He mentions big names getting hired, like Yan LeCun going to Facebook, Andrew Ng going to Baidu for a while.
Yeah, Baidu got Andrew Ng and really pushed ahead in things like speech recognition and Chinese early on. Shows how crucial getting that top talent is.
But Lee also makes a really interesting point. The truly fundamental breakthroughs, the next big thing in AI, they're rare and unpredictable.
Yeah, you can't just schedule a breakthrough, can you? Deep learning itself came from a relatively small group, people who were maybe a bit outside the mainstream for a while.
So the next big leap could come from anywhere, really. Not necessarily just from the giants.
That's his point. It's inherently unpredictable. And he also stresses how vital the hardware is, the computer chips, the semiconductors. That's becoming another huge area of competition, especially with China pushing hard to develop its own chip capabilities.
Yes, the foundational tech. Okay, let's move towards the impact on us, on society. Lee definitely addresses the ethical side of AI.
He has to. It's unavoidable. Things like, how does a self-driving car decide who to hit in an accident?
The trolley problem, basically.
Exactly. And the massive issue of job displacement. That looms large in the book.
It really does. He throws out some pretty stark numbers, suggesting that, technically, AI could automate maybe 40–50% of U.S. jobs in the next, 15–25 years?
Yeah, it's a sobering projection. Even if it doesn't happen quite that fast, the potential scale of disruption is enormous.
And it's not just automating specific tasks, right? He talks about AI disrupting whole industries from the ground up.
Right. It's not just replacing one worker with one robot. It's creating entirely new business models. He gives examples like AI-driven lending, automated convenience stores like F5 Future Store, algorithmic news feeds like Tuqiao.
Stuff that needs way fewer people or different kinds of people.
Exactly, which naturally leads to worries about inequality. If AI makes companies vastly more productive with fewer workers, where does that value go? Does it just concentrate wealth even more?
Leaving a lot of people behind, potentially.
That's the fear. Lee doesn't really sugarcoat these potential downsides. He thinks we need to be thinking about these societal impacts right now.
But he doesn't leave it there, does he? The book takes a more humanistic turn towards the end, drawing a lot from his own personal experience.
It really does. His battle with cancer seems to have been profoundly transformative for him.
Yeah, he talks about shifting from this intense focus on work, optimization, achievement, what he calls a machine-like mentality, towards realizing the deeper value of human connection, love, compassion. Things that machines, well, they just can't do.
Right. He uses AlphaGo again, brilliant at Go, but it feels nothing. It can't love, it can't empathize. Facing his own mortality really brought that home for him.
And that leads him to this really hopeful idea, finding a synergy between AI and the human heart.
Yeah, using the material abundance that AI could potentially create. Using that to free us up as humans to focus more on caring for each other, on building relationships.
It's a beautiful vision, actually. AI handles the routine stuff, the analysis.
And we focus on the uniquely human things.
Hmm.
Empathy, creativity, connection.
So how do we get there? He talks about solutions for the job problem, right?
Yeah.
For retraining, maybe sharing work differently.
Exploring different models. And he discusses universal basic income, UBI. Acknowledges the debates around it. Is it just a safety net, or could it be something more like VC for the people, as some call it?
Giving people the freedom to pursue other things.
Potentially. These are all ideas on the table for dealing with that potential disruption.
And I liked his idea of human-AI symbiosis, especially in areas like healthcare.
Yeah, that's compelling. AI could be amazing at diagnosis, crunching all the data.
Right, better than any single doctor, maybe.
But then the human doctor or nurse provides the compassionate caregiving, the empathy, the touch, the explanation. AI augments the human. It doesn't just replace them.
Making us better at being human, in a way.
That's the hope. And to support this, he talks about needing things like service sector impact investing, funding jobs centered around care, community, education, human-centric roles.
And government policies to encourage that shift.
Yeah.
He even mentions like a social investment stipend, rewarding people for doing care work or community service.
Yeah, trying to realign our economic incentives with what we actually value as humans. He shares that nice story about the volunteer driver at the Buddhist monastery.
And how common volunteering is in Taiwan.
Exactly. Examples of societies that already place a high value on service and connection, not just traditional economic output. It's about consciously choosing what kind of future we want.
So wrapping up our deep dive into AI superpowers, it's clear AI is rising incredibly fast. We see these two distinct paths, China and the US, driving it forward in different ways.
Yeah, the super apps, the mobile payments in China showing one kind of transformation, the intense competition, the government push.
Contrasted with Silicon Valley's focus, the talent wars, and then the big questions hanging over everything: job displacement, inequality.
But also that crucial call for a human-centric approach,
Right.
finding ways to blend AI's power with our own unique human qualities.
So, as AI keeps diving deeper into our lives, into your world, the real question we want to leave you with is, how are you going to use your uniquely human skills, your empathy, your creativity, in this new landscape that's unfolding?
Because ultimately, the future of AI isn't just about the code or the chips. It's about the choices we make right now. What do we value? How do we define meaningful work? What does it really mean to be human when machines get smarter and smarter? Lots to think about there.